Welcome to episode 53 of the Hail Mary podcast. I'm A. Toves, and I'm joined by my husband, the Toves. We're back to recap the men's and women's basketball season. Let's get started. In our last podcast, we were about to start the second half of conference play. At that point, neither the men or the women really had the results that they were hoping for. But, there was this promise that they could turn it around in the second half. And while the men made a little bit of progress, the women had a phenomenal end of their season and almost pulled off a Cinderella run in the conference tournament. But let's start out by talking about the men, and then we can kind of go into talking about the women, right?
So the low point and go and end with a high note, huh?
Sure.
Okay.
The other thing that we were anticipating the last time we had a podcast about basketball was that we would shortly know, what was going to happen with Coach Henson. Well, now we have that information. Dr. Campos put out the email saying that Coach Henson would be here for the last year of his contract. While that news has been met with mixed reviews, I understand there's opinions on both sides. We're not really going to debate that decision and whether or not Dr. Campos made the right decision, but we want to talk about some of the factors that we think went into how she came to that result. We said it before a couple of times. We really think this came down to dollars and cents. UTSA has a lot of different projects going on right now that need funding, including building the new facility for basketball and volleyball, the covered practice facility for football. Every time you hear Coach Traylor, there's some other need that he's talking about in terms of coaches' salaries, NIL, you name it, right? But we know that the athletics department has money committed to multiple places. We need upgrades in softball, baseball. We just, renegotiated our baseball coaches' salary. So there's a lot of different factors and different places where we have money going. And I think what Dr. Campos was telling us with this decision is that she doesn't believe that paying a buyout and paying the additional money that it would take to replace Coach Henson with that next level coach was going to get her the return on investment this year, because she was going to have to pull those funds from somewhere else to put that money into the basketball program. Probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 to $800,000 would have been the cost between the buyout and the upgrade in salary. And she's clearly sending us a message that she thinks that money is better spent in other areas. Like it, agree with it, disagree with it, but it is what it is. And I think, again, the way that email read, it was not a ringing endorsement of Coach Henson or his performance on court, but it was pretty clear that we're kicking the can down the road for one more year because, we feel like that money is better spent in other places.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when I read it too, I didn't get that sort of we really support him type of feeling. Like it's one thing if he had a tough season and, it was like, had a bunch of injuries, had, a lot of heartbreaking losses. And you're like, well, there was progress and there was something there, but you already kind of touched on it. The men had very little progress in the second half of the season. Like right when they should have surged, they didn't. Things just didn't come together. And that's one thing, as we talk about resources, that's one thing we have to hit Henson on here. There's a lot of fans that believe that he is good at X's and O's. And, one of the things he said before the season was that he was going to have a motion offense. I did not see a motion offense. I saw a lot of standing around. I saw a lot of waiting for somebody else to make some sort of move. There wasn't a lot of harmony between the team as they worked together. So there is your, as you put it, ROI. Like we're just not getting enough out of what we thought we invested. And because of it, as you said, like it or not, like this is a decision. We're moving forward. If you want to talk about, facilities, that's been thrown out as something as well. But, to me, it goes back to the Frank Wilson argument. Like, he said he had to go home and take showers between practices. Well, that has nothing to do with your game planning or how you mismanage the clock. In-game things. That doesn't affect any of that, but it's a convenient excuse if you're not doing well at UTSA. I will say this about Coach Henson, like, it's not coming directly out of his mouth, but I think it's coming out indirectly in terms of the way maybe he's talked to other donors, other fans, because they have brought that up. And it's like, well, that, again, it doesn't diminish the fact that, you at the beginning of the season, you talked about, motion offense that you didn't end up really installing, and just how this team is not buttoned up. And those just aren't factors in facility does not mean that you're going to be just a better coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that facilities are certainly a challenge of the job at UTSA.
Right.
I mean, there are a lot of challenges for Henson and for whomever the next coach is, right? We don't have the facilities yet. We're saying that we're going to build them, but we haven't broken ground. We have challenges when it comes to NIL for these players. There's challenges in the fact that you have to play in the convo, and first of all, we've got a practice facility coming, but we haven't really gotten to the point of talking about replacing the convo. Third, you have kind of stagnant attendance. So, I mean, there's a lot of different challenges that go into this role, but again, all of those things don't excuse, not being able to, like you said, have the on-court performance, because if we're really going to make an argument that, again, facilities could fix everything, then what we're basically saying is that if we would have had a race, Frank Wilson would have also won 2 conference championships. And I don't think that would have happened. You still have to have player development. You still have to have a vision for the team. And those are some of the things that I think are just lacking. Now, I'm not saying that Coach Henson's a terrible coach by any means, but there are opportunities that he has in how he has a vision for the team or lack of vision for the team, how he's developed or failed to develop players, and that piece is just as important or more important than the fact that facilities do hamper recruiting efforts.
Putting it one extra way, the mothership, UT, has some really pretty facilities, but I haven't seen any sort of football or basketball championships in the last, 10 years?
Right.
15 years. So, again, they've had a lot of failures there. And, I mean, again,
it's a piece of the puzzle, but It's not the only piece of the puzzle.
So I'm glad we kind of went through that, because now my next question to you is, what is something you want to see in the next coach? Because let's be honest. One more year of Coach Henson, there really is no realistic way that he turns this around.
Right.
I mean, I get it. Maybe he miraculously wins the NCAA tournament. I don't see that's not realistic. So what is it that you want to see from the next coach?
Well, okay, let's start off with who the rumor was that UTSA was looking at this season. So there's been a couple of sources that said UTSA talked with Texas A&M Corpus Christi coach Steve Lutz, but they couldn't agree on salary dollars, and now we know that he has taken the Western Kentucky job. Clearly he was a candidate, but if you were to ask me, is he the candidate that I would want for the next coach at UTSA? No. I would rather look for someone more in the Karen Aston style, where it's a former P5 coach who had a successful program. Maybe it just wasn't good enough for whatever school they're at, so they've got this history of success, and they're looking to revitalize their career by coming to UTSA. I think that coach is going to have a vision that they can sell to the players. We're going to have facilities. We're going into this new conference. Even though it's a 42-year program, there's still the opportunity that you can come here and you can be a part of history. If you go back and look at our record books, we've moved up conferences, but Coach Henson has players, a lot of them actually, that are in those record books, whether we're talking about, Javon and Keaton Wallace or Jacob Germany or Nick Allen. I mean, there's a couple of different players who have made that history book. So it's still attainable. It's not like there's a 42-year history and it's going to be very challenging for someone to come in and make this program something special. So they need to be able to sell that vision. I think it needs to be someone who's going to come with a history of player development, a history of winning, and really be able to sell that culture.
I like that you brought up the Steve Lutz thing because it felt very half-hearted from Dr. Campos. Like, if he was the true answer, I feel like she would have tried harder to get him. Now, again, that would have meant like shifting funds and doing all sorts of things like we talked about in terms of the resources. But I think that even he would have balked. I think he was looking for higher. And the reason is because of how much work it's going to take over here at UTSA to do this. So, I'm in line with you in terms of trying to find that coach. I think there's certainly candidates out there. I know it may sound like we're swinging, too much for the fences, but let's be clear. For the entire history, it's been a mediocre program. Had some fun moments. Not going to dog them for this, but we were always looking for this. Either like the last two coaches have been P5 assistants or major conference assistants. And before that, it was Tim Carter, who came from somewhere called Nebraska, Omaha. And then Stu Starner before then, who was the last coach with single-digit losses for a season in 91-92, came from Montana State. I think if UTSA is, and fans are looking for it to be something much bigger, we got to aim much bigger. I mean, if you guys really think that there's a way for us to look at some sort of mid-major coach that's been successful and we try to money whip one of these mid-major schools, then let's do it. I just don't think that that's necessarily what they're looking at, but I think this next coach really signals what direction or how they truly feel about this men's program. Because if it's higher and you don't feel too great about it, I think there's a lot of questions that start coming up, and we start wondering, I mean, are we truly trying to have a successful program, or are we just trying to fill a body in that role?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Lutz to me seems like somebody who we're hoping is a diamond in the rough. I mean, he's got 2 years of success behind him as a head coach. Obviously, he's coming off of the NCAA tournament, so he's got some momentum. But 2 years is the history. And, maybe that's an outlier. I mean, maybe it is the start of something fabulous and we could get him in at the low level and have him build up. But I'd rather see, based on the state of where our program has been for a number of years, finding someone, again, like Coach Aston, who can use that name to entice people to come here, and someone who's been able to demonstrate years of success.
Yeah, I really want to see that investment. And, again, like I said, let's seem like just sort of the easy answer. We'll see if he's interested. But, to that, I don't fault him for turning it down, because he went to Western Kentucky, and it was a mid-level CUSA program. I mean, they finally got into the sort of mid-level and were starting to drop lower, and they made a move. And I think Lutz saw it and said, that's a better situation for me than coming to UTSA.
Yeah, I mean, they already have the facilities. And, again, they've been able to compete, even maybe not at as high a level as they want to compete, but they've been able to kind of hit that mid-tier Conference USA level of success. So it's easier to propel that to the top of the Conference USA, particularly with all of these teams that are leaving.
Right. So, look, there's going to be much more. We'll get more information as we go through next season. Obviously, it's going to be a tough one because of the fact that, honestly, in my opinion, because we are keeping Coach Henson, we are, to me, in my opinion, essentially punting the next 3 seasons of AAC men's basketball play. It's just going to be very difficult to, I think, bring in the talent in order to get to the level we want to see it at. But certainly it could be done, but I don't want to rest my hopes on that right away.
Yeah.
For that.
I mean, the other piece of that is, there's a bit of a conundrum when it comes to UTSA basketball because this past year, I mean, obviously we didn't have the success that we wanted, but yet our attendance was up like 20% over the last year, and we're at pre-COVID levels now. So, it is kind of interesting again because you would have expected to see, a drop in attendance, not an increase in attendance, but hopefully we can, maintain that or not see a drop next year. But it's been sort of interesting to see over the years, UTSA's attendance has not been much higher, even when it was a successful program, than it is today.
Yeah, it is a conundrum that is the basketball program / Coach Henson. Look, I wish him the best of luck. I think we know exactly where this is headed, but overall, I hope he stays classy and doesn't try to throw the middle finger at us as he leaves. And I don't think he will. I think he's too nice of a guy. I think you've kind of covered that to do that. But you just never know. Something might change. Something might spur him to say something offhand to a reporter, and there we go. But I think he's going to be fine on the way out. But let's talk about this season because 10-22, 4-16 in CUSA play. I mean, let's be honest. It was exactly where we thought we'd end up. I mean, everybody thought we'd end up at the bottom, and that's where it was. Lots of issues, as I already mentioned before, when it came to offense, when it came towards having really just being buttoned up. And I mean, we've seen it now for 7 years. And so, you can maybe excuse it early on because you're trying to get a fit with your players and really trying to make sure you understand what they're great at. And it just hasn't translated, and we saw it plenty of times coming out of timeouts. You'd see the guys just not execute. Sure, you can point at the level of talent with the players, but at some point, it's on you. I mean, think about it just in our real world. You're a supervisor, and you're managing people. I mean, if you're not disciplined in the way you handle them, it's just not. It's a reflection on you. So, with that said, it was a It was a close loss to Rice in the first round of the conference tournament, but very much I think what's been going on in the last couple seasons here at UTSA, just not enough with a little bit of time left. So tough loss, but look, we got some accolades. Jaffe Medor and Jacob Germany named to the CUSA honorable mention team. And DJ Richards named to the CUSA all-freshman team. So, obviously had some accolades for the guys. Maybe not seen as, that some fans have kind of questioned how good they are. Look, however you feel about them, the reality is they're struggling because of the coach. And, they need to be put into better positions. The tough part here is that we're now going to talk about the fact that this roster is going to look different because we've got 7 guys in the portal. Lachlan Boffinger, Xavier Johnson, Alu, Lamine Sabali, Jacob Germany, Jaffe Medor, and DJ Richards. So all the 3 guys that got accolades are in the transfer portal. And the other guys didn't get a lot of minutes, but they sure added some athleticism, added role player type mentalities to the team that, they didn't get a lot of minutes, but, there were times where maybe you needed a Boffinger or a Sabali and you just didn't get it. And, Henson also created some issues here because he just was roller coaster with some of these guys' minutes. I don't understand when you feel like you've got a roster that maybe isn't ready to compete where you're just not playing guys. Just play all the guys. What do you have to lose? You end up 10-22. Was it going to get worse? I don't understand. But, I think out of these guys, the bigger losses are Medor, because it felt like you could at least have a steady hand for next season going into AAC play. But obviously the bigger loss is DJ Richards, more because of the fact that he's a freshman. And, when you were talking earlier about etching your name in the record books, that's something that DJ Richards could have been sold on, I think, harder. I didn't see him as a guy that you build everything around, but he's certainly a nice player to have as essentially a weapon on the wing. he's gotten some interest, no offers, but he has talked about getting a lot of interest from a lot of different teams and at different really levels in terms of mid-major, major conference. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. It'll be interesting to see where the rest of them end up. But let's look at what we have coming back, because there's one guy I'm going to start off right away saying I'm surprised he's not in the portal, and that's Josh Farmer.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought that Josh Farmer was going to be the one who was going to jump first. And certainly the transfer portal is still open, so there's that possibility. Simply because there seemed to be tension between him and Henson on the sidelines during many different games. Not to mention, he seemed like someone who had, at times, a lot of potential, but you just didn't see it being developed. And so I wondered if he was going to enter the portal because he felt like he wasn't getting the development that would allow him to reach another level.
He's a 6'10", like pogo stick guy that just can jump off the court like that. And I just, there's certainly, I'm not saying he'd be a star, but I think he could be much more of a contributor if he was used differently. And, I think that just goes along with a lot of these guys, even the guys that are in the transfer portal. Like there just seemed to be something where it just wasn't translating. Look, Christian Tucker is returning. I think he's a good defensive guard. Again, not saying he's a star, but again, a solid contributor to a team that needs defense more than anything. Masal Diouf is a solid, post player. I think he'll do well. Cutting out a career here as a role player. One guy we haven't really talked about too much is John Buggs. I was kind of surprised that he was still around. I mean, I know he's bounced around a lot, but I wasn't sure how he felt because he had some tough shooting stretches. But with him coming back, I think Christian Tucker and him can form a nice backcourt. Again, I think they'll be solid. And that's the best I can say, but not guys that are going to be superstars, but certainly guys that you can at the very least count on to, get you some defensive stops or at least play a little smarter. Something to think about there. Last guy is Sam Adarawi. It looks like he redshirted because there's very little film on him. He didn't really get off the bench this year. I'm assuming he redshirted because he just didn't get on the court. Again, I don't see him as essentially a guy that probably is a major, a major star. Probably could maybe contribute, but if you weren't able to get on even at least a few minutes on the court this season, then, it's tough to justify the fact that, he's going to be here for a long time. But it would be wrong of us not to, not end this section with the guy that is coming back that wasn't able to play this year. Carl Lingard, hometown boy, transferred in from Kansas State, because of compliance issues, wasn't able to play. Coach Henson said at the last basketball radio show that he's going to build around him. Now, unless Lingard comes in and starts averaging 28 points and 17 rebounds, I don't know that this really translates into what he needs. I don't know. I'm struggling to see where the offense is going to come from. At the very least, with the last group of guys, you knew that Medor combined with John Buggs, combined with maybe DJ Richards, were at least going to, get you some points and at least keep you in a game. But there's not a lot of production left here. And Lingard, to me, is still just an unknown quantity. I don't know unless you think differently.
Well, I mean, because he didn't play that much at Kansas State, we really don't know exactly, what he's going to do. I mean, obviously, Henson has a lot of faith in him to make the statement that he's going to build a team around him, but, it's hard to judge that from the outside when you haven't been able to really see what that looks like.
Exactly. And that's what just makes this a big question mark. This team just needs more pieces. and I know that's a duh statement, but, look, half the team entered the portal. So you're going to have to replace this. So going into his last season, Coach Henson's going to have to bring in half a team and is going to have to get them ready to play in the AAC. I mean, do we think that it's really going to end up well? No. I just don't. It's going to... We had put this as a question when we first started trying to prepare for this podcast episode, and it's just kind of evolved now to we're going to be picked at the bottom of the AAC. Like, I think we would. I think it's definite now with all the transfers. I just don't see that. Even with some of the additions, we have Nazar Mahmoud that came in. It was signed. I mean, he doesn't really jump off the page. He looks like he could potentially be a nice contributor, and he's going to have to be a big-time contributor if Henson wants to try to even make a run at keeping his job. But I just didn't see it from him when I saw his video. So, any last thoughts on the men's?
No.
All right. Since the men just aren't where we would like to see them as fans, I will tell you about a program that is at a much better spot, and that's our UTSA women's basketball team. I'm really high on them. This is year 2 of the rebuild, but technically you could make an argument it's year 1 because, Coach Aston had to kind of punt that first season because of the fact that she just came in late and was just trying to find anybody to fill spots on the team. They certainly, from the time that we talked about this midseason, it really seemed like they were starting to kind of learn something about themselves. But the question that we had going to this back part of this, essentially the second half of the season was, did they truly learn, and are they going to use those lessons to move forward? And in many ways they did.
Yeah,
they upset a Middle Tennessee team that ended up number 1 in the league.
Yeah, you really saw them kind of come together in the second half of the season and climb from, I think when we did our preview, the midseason preview, they were tied for last place with UAB, I believe. And then you saw them climb as high as 6th in Conference USA.
Which is terrific. They essentially 13-19, which obviously the overall record skewed by the issues early in the season when they were trying to figure themselves out, when they were trying to learn what their roles are. Ending with 9-11 in Conference USA play, really getting on the long streak there at the very end in CUSA and going into the tournament. And then, honestly, doing such a great job in the tournament where they just really, I think, energized the fan base because they won their first game, which we thought they should have because of the fact that they played FAU in the first round, which was a good matchup for them. They only won by 1, but it was survive and advance, right? And then the second game was even a better matchup against Rice. Rice really never stood a chance against UTSA. I thought that the ladies did a lot of things that we really see that we want to see from the men's program. They really ramped up their defense. And because they ramped up their defense, they gave themselves a chance when they kind of went in the scoring drought against Rice, kept them in the game. Mm-hmm. And, as much as we talk about this is what we want to see, in a men's program, we're seeing with the women, but why the lack of support?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Certainly there's an improvement when you look at attendance for this program year over year, and it's significant, 62% year over year. And while that sounds fabulous on the surface, if you take the attendance and you compare it to the men's program, which arguably did not have the results last year or this year that we wanted to see, the men still have 32% higher attendance on average than the women, which I just find perplexing. And you didn't even really see a difference in the women's attendance or significant difference from the beginning of the season to the end. It kind of was fairly steady. So you would expect that fans that aren't seeing what they want to see with the men's program would look to the women's program and see that where they're having the success, they're building on it. This is a surging program, and put their support behind women's basketball. And we just haven't quite seen that yet. And hopefully next year, we'll see a difference between the two, or at least see the women get to a point where they're on par with the men. But you would really hope to see more fan support for these ladies than we've seen this past year.
I still think that UTSA should be a women's basketball school. It's not to say that I don't want to see success for the men, but nothing wrong with at least building up this program and really getting behind them. And to your point, I think the best message to send to the administration is we love what we're seeing over here, and we're going to throw more support to it. It's not to say that not to support the other teams. It's just at least show the administration that you care about what's going on over here. And
And that
you
you
know,
want to see a continued investment in that program.
Exactly. Well, let's talk about this program because we have essentially what we call three veteran, I think, quote unquote stars, but really one big star in Jordan Jenkins. Obviously came from USC, had success there, came here, and really was the focal point of the offense and of the team. As Jordan went early on in the season, so did the rest of the team. I'll say this: the men lack a Jordan Jenkins type player, someone that they can really say, this is the centerpiece of our team, and this is who we're going to just rally around. And I know that Henson's going to try to do that, but I feel like we've got it here with the women and Jordan Jenkins, to the tune of the fact that she scored 21 points a game, averaged 7.5 rebounds. She was CUSA Newcomer of the Year and Player of the Year.
And she led not only UTSA, but also Conference USA in scoring.
I know, she's incredible. She essentially establishes a new single season scoring record. Just had a fantastic season. I know she would have liked to have a better last game of the season. She was really torn up about that loss, and you really felt for her. But, I think based on everything that happened throughout the season, it's good to see the growth from her, but also from the rest of the team. Alyssa Coleman is one person to bring out, too, because I thought that she played really well defensively. Ends up on the CUSA all-defensive team. Second half of the season, it really felt like she started feeling much more comfortable in, what her role was on defense and how she needed to defend and essentially cover for the wing players when, defenders started or opponents started driving to the basket. So
yeah, you saw her definitely grow in the fact that she could make those defensive plays without getting into foul trouble. Now, of course, there was a couple of exceptions to that, but you really saw that development in her later in the season that you didn't see early in the season.
And to me, that's what led her to be one of on the defensive team, and I think that's something to continue to build on. I think she knows her role, and that is again a contrast between the teams, right? You see, Coach Aston has put roles for these players, and they know exactly what they're going to have to go out there and do. Now, sometimes it doesn't come together, but at the very least, they know what their responsibilities are. Which brings us to Kira White. She's been sort of like the all everything, for everything that Jordan can't do because, she can't really bring up the ball. She can't really, there's certain things, there's limits to where Jordan can be, can't be everywhere. Kira White seems to be everywhere. If she's not chasing down a loose ball, she's bringing the ball up, she's setting the offense up, she's being sort of that steady hand, but also letting go some crazy passes, which is why I kind of feel like she's like the Manu Ginobili of this team. There are some times where she lets go of some passes and you're like, I would not have done that. But I understood it just because there is some Manu to her in which she becomes sort of this gunslinger and she wants to make that big play. Mm-hmm. And in the second part of the season, more often than not, those chances and risks she took paid off because the team was running the floor and doing a much better job of anticipating that she was going to let one of those big passes rip. So really excited to see how she continues to grow next season. She had some problems around midseason, up to midseason actually, with her shooting. Her shooting seemed to improve in the second half.
Yeah.
She really got on a run, and when she was playing really aggressive, this team responded and really opened up the entire team. To the fact that Sydney Love, one of the freshmen here, named to the CUSA All-Freshman team, she was just absolutely terrific when she returned to the team. I felt like she went from sort of this timid, unsure freshman to all of a sudden kind of blossoming just right in front of our eyes. I thought her handles were much better. Her defense was good. And in the conference tournament, it really showed because when Jordan was saddled with some foul trouble, Sydney took over. Mm-hmm. And Sydney didn't blink at all. And the team kind of deferred to her. And that was just, I don't know, both of us got excited.
Yeah, there were times early in the season where you would see Sydney get pressure and it almost seemed like she panicked a little or she didn't know how to respond to that. But by the time we got to conference tournament, when she faced that same kind of pressure, she seemed very self-assured, very confident. And I think that made it a significant difference in the team.
Absolutely. I mean, at that point, you didn't have to bring so many players back to help her out. And it got essentially everybody set up on offense. Again, fantastic work from her. She's essentially, I would say, a rising star and probably the face of this team for the next, I'll say 3 seasons, because while I know Jordan's going to be back, I think there's a lot to really like about Sydney Love and what can be built up around her. In terms of the other freshmen, Maya Linton really stood out to me. The front court was really thin. There just didn't have that many players there because Nissa Sam Grant wasn't eligible to play. Maya really took over. I really felt like she kind of came into her own as well late into the season, especially defensively. She swatted WKU players in the last game.
The ball.
One of their shots, right at a UTSA cheerleader. I was just really impressed. Like, I wasn't ready for her to swat it as hard as she did. But she really sent a message. And, that's, again, knows her role and knows exactly what she has to do. And, I want to continue seeing her growth. I'll be interested to see how she grows in the next couple seasons. Also interesting how her role gets adjusted, because we do have a newcomer coming in who essentially redshirted, I guess, this season, and Nissa Sam Grant, but there's some other players coming on, at least one more, a freshman. So I think we'll see a little bit more of Maya. Can't wait to see her grow. And Madison Cockrell came back from injury after essentially getting injured in the first half of the season. It was tough. She came into the conference tournament, I thought played well. I think she's going to be a nice compliment to Sydney Love. And, it'll be interesting to see just how this team kind of moves forward. A lot of excitement around these freshmen. I talked about it at length during the midseason, but, the fact that you were able to get about 5 freshmen, haven't really talked about Sienna or Alexis Parker, but both of them also played some roles throughout the season. Sienna much more prominent because of the fact that we had some issues there at point guard where Sydney was gone, Madison was out with injury, so needed someone to step up, and she was able to come in and help out. Alexis Parker, I'd probably like to see a little bit more from her, but coach is going to play who she's going to play, so hope to see more of her in the next few seasons. But a lot to like about them. They really increased their scoring. Essentially, it's only by a point, but their shooting improved by about 3 percentage points in the second half of the season. Their defense really ramped up. They allowed 5 points less than they did from the midseason to the end of the season. And that, I think, was key in their winning streak. Obviously, again, I talked about the fact that they were able to ramp up their defense and keep other teams from scoring, giving them a chance to win. And they really made lockdown on defense with keeping opponents from shooting 40%, which they were at midseason, and then ended up 37% in the second half of the season. So a lot of good things from this team, and I think as they continue to grow more comfortable with Coach Aston and what she wants, continue to solidify their roles, lots of love. But we are losing 3 players.
Yeah. Haley Atwood being the most prominent because she started a significant portion of the games, but then also Queen Alabu and Deborah, I'm not going to pronounce Deborah's last name correctly, so I'm not even going to try. But those 3 seniors are leaving, and so it'll be interesting to see really who takes Haley's starting position next season.
A lot of different combos that Coach Aston can make, and so yeah, it's fascinating. Do we get one of the freshmen from this season to step in to one of those roles, or is she going to look to one of the incoming freshmen to take one of those roles? So let's talk real quick about the incoming freshmen, because they are some players to look forward for. Idara Udo, 6'1" forward, good size, athleticism. Feel like she's got some solid low post moves. So again, adding to the Alyssa, Nissa Sam Grant, Maya Linton, adding to those players, see what she can bring. Again, if she can add some scoring and some rebounding, certainly going to be something pretty exciting for this team. In terms of guards, we had Emma Lucio from the Valley. She's a 5'9" guard. She's got a nice shooting touch. She's pretty fiery, and looks like she's going to really bring a spark to this team. Coach Aston had said that she was certainly going to be one of the fan favorites. So look forward to see her and how she fits into this team as a contributor next season. And then ending with Asia Proctor, another 5'9" guard. This one from Shirt Clemens. I'm laughing because already she's got a fan in Frank Harris because that's where he went to school. She was a McDonald's All-American nominee, so big time from her. She adds athleticism, length, scoring, and some shooting. So exciting to see what these three are going to bring to this team.
Yeah, especially as we move into the American Conference. If you look at kind of the landscape from the American this year, ended up with 2 teams in the NCAA tournament. East Carolina ended up winning the conference championship, even though I think they went in as the 3rd seed. And then South Florida was the regular season winner. They really had quite a run up until the tournament. And, they went in as a number 1 seed. I think their only loss in conference play was in that tournament. So their record was good enough to get them a second bid into the conference or the NCAA tournament. If you look at kind of the layout of what's left for the team, the teams that are going to be next year in American, the top 3, South Florida, Memphis, and East Carolina will all be back. Houston was 4th in the American Conference this season. They're really losing the bottom 2 schools, Cincinnati and Central Florida. And if you kind of look at all of those middle schools, the middle group that's left, there seems to be a lot of parity. There were 5 teams that won either 6 or 7 games in conference play. So once you get past kind of those top 3 schools, seems like everyone's kind of in the middle of the pack. So it'll be interesting to see where the schools that are moving up from Conference USA kind of fit into that. But I do think there's opportunity for UTSA building on the momentum with, a young group of players going into the American, that it's very likely that we could end up in the middle of the pack. We might end up kind of pre-conference bottom 3rd just based on where we ended the season last year, but I think there's a really good opportunity for us to be in the mix. Likely not in those top 3, especially if you look at South Florida's roster. I think they have a lot of freshmen, so I'm assuming the expectation is going to be that they're going to be right at the top of the conference, but certainly, a chance for us to be in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, South Florida is a tough team. They ran into the buzzsaw that is South Carolina, who's just the number 1 overall seed of the tournament and defending national champion. Certainly not somebody that South Florida really wanted to see in the second round of the tournament, but what can you do, right? Like you can just try to give yourself a chance in the tournament, get there, and then whatever happens. But obviously a very tough team to try to really take on and upset. But that said, there's a lot of things about these, like South Florida, East Carolina, and even in CUSA, when you had Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee, a lot of the common factors there were the fact that they had a lot of great 3-point shooting. And that's something that needed to be addressed by, Coach Aston. I think is still a question out there. I mean, we could improve a little bit more on that, but, she did address the fact that there, some more length, some more athleticism. So, again, when we're looking at these programs, the reason you're also seeing so much optimism from what you've previewed in the AAC is because of the fact that she is addressing these gaps. She knows that we need to get a little taller. She knows we need to have a little more athleticism. So, she gets these new freshmen, but then, to give herself a chance in the AAC. And she's admitted as much that it is going to be a tougher conference. But with this kind of momentum that she's built up and this enthusiasm that she's built amongst some of the fans, I'd say jump on this bandwagon because I think Coach Aston's got something going, and I think that she's going to be able to get us into the tournament within the next few years. I won't say that it would be a disappointment if she doesn't. I mean, it isn't a very easy road to get to the NCAA tournament, but certainly that's got to be one of the next steps, because she's done a great job with this team. And, honestly, I'm excited to see what they've got for next season. I can't wait for it.
Yeah. All right, before we go, let's talk a little bit about spring football news. Now, we're not going to get too in-depth. Obviously, we've only had 1 week of spring practice before the team went on spring break. Once we get to, having our spring game, we'll be able to reconvene and kind of go through everything that we've learned. But first of all, big news that came out recently was that the spring game date has changed. It's going to be on Friday, April 14th at 6:30, still at the Alamo Dome, but they had to make a move because the original date had a conflict with the XFL. Just a couple of things that we've learned from initial interviews with Coach Traylor. There are several veteran players, if you will, that aren't going to be practicing as much during spring, either limited or not practicing at all due to injury. Frank Harris, JT Clark, Josh Cephas, Zachary Franklin, Jamal Lignan, Rashad Wisdom, Brandon Matterson were a couple that he mentioned. But really the big thing that Coach Traylor talked about was this spring he has 17 new or transfer players on campus, which is the most that he's had since he's been at UTSA. So really this spring is to focus on those newer players or transfers and their development so that they get comfortable with the team, the playbook, the coaches, as we head into the fall. As he said before, players like Frank and JT and Josh, he knows what they're capable of. He's comfortable with them. He doesn't really need to see them practicing as much as he does, these new kids that they've brought in from the transfer portal or that are coming in from high school early. A couple of coaching changes. Joe Price was promoted to associate head coach, still in his same role, but he has that associate head coach title now. And Coach Traylor brought in a general manager. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
Mike Giglio.
Mike
we'll
Giglio.
Just do that.
And we also learned or had confirmed that there will not be a special teams coordinator this year, so it's going to be special teams by committee. As I've said before, I'm not really a big fan of that, but we'll certainly see, how that all plays out. One of the things as we go into spring practice, though, that we're going to be really interested to see is, how the running back room develops. We have a new transfer from Vanderbilt, Rocco Griffin, a JUCO transfer, Robert Henry, and a high schooler, Brandon High, who, all have a lot of promise. And so we'll really be interested in seeing, how that room develops. Traylor has mentioned that he's really happy with the depth of the O-line, but this year he's concerned about injuries on the D-line. So it seems like once we get one front line fixed, the other one starts to have challenges.
Yeah, I don't think I'm too worried about the defensive line. I think it's the offensive line. I think has been the crutch the last couple seasons. So, they've still been able to do some good things because of the fact that even though they've had, I should say, injuries to the offensive line. But let's keep an eye on the offensive line still, because I think the defensive line, there might be some things you can do, but. Yeah, I'm still. We're bringing guys back that have injury history, so.
Yeah. We assume they're healthy, but for how long, right?
Yeah.
Soccer also has some exhibition games going this spring, so if you're interested in supporting soccer and going out and watching those games, they started their exhibition by beating Houston in their first game. The next one coming up is on Saturday, March 25th against UIW. Tentatively, we've heard it'll be at 7 p.m., but keep an eye out on Twitter to see the exact time. One of the interesting things that we learned about these exhibition games is that in some cases, instead of there being two halves, they might play thirds. So there might be like 3 periods.
Yeah, they'll still be 90 minutes, but 3 periods of 30 minutes. So it won't be like, oh yeah, we're done after 2 periods. They might still do some 45, but because of the fact that they're all sort of, it's not a tough training that they're doing, and it's more just sort of like, just trying to get them to have some games against other other teams, and these other teams are also wanting to do the same. Yeah, we were told that, and we thought it was kind of interesting that it'll be agreed upon by the coaches before the game. So, if it's not announced, at least there might be 3 periods.
Exactly. If you're not able to make it out this Saturday, there's 2 other opportunities to see the ladies this spring at home. Sunday, April 2nd, they'll be playing Seminole State St. Mary's, and Friday, April 7th, they'll be playing A&M Corpus Christi. They'll also be breaking in a new assistant coach and have 3 mid-year transfers that are joining the team. So, an opportunity to kind of preview and get to see them in play.
Looking forward again to this team because Coach Pittman has done a really good job of finding some more talent. He's starting to remind me of Coach Traylor, where it's like, oh, you let go of some really kind of stellar players that graduated, yet you're replacing them with some really good players that may have some pretty high ceilings here. So really looking forward to what Coach Pittman is going to be able to put on the field and how he's able to shape them.
And then one other thing to look forward to, UTSA's Giving Day, April 4th and 5th. We've had a lot of discussion about needing to raise funds for facilities and NIL and other things. So this is your opportunity if you are able to donate to do that. If you're not necessarily able to give a lot of money, one way that you can help out, there is an alumni, Ray Redding, who is donating $1 for each attendee of the softball game on March 22nd versus Texas State, and $1 for every attendee of the baseball game on April 1st. So if you're not necessarily able to donate money to UTSA during Giving Day, you can come and support the softball team and the baseball team, and Ray will be donating based on your attendance. Other than that, the athletics department indicated that one of the areas of their greatest need for Giving Day this year was the Women's Opportunity Fund. We've talked a lot about women's programs today, women's basketball and soccer. This is a fund that helps specifically to ensure that our female student athletes have the best opportunity for success, cutting edge equipment, team leadership training, travel experiences. So if you're so inclined, and you're able to donate to UTSA, this is a great place for you to consider putting your money, as well as supporting the Runners Rising Project with NIL funds. We support Runners Rising, and one of the reasons that we did that was because they're also very focused on supporting all student athletes, not student athletes from one particular sport. So there's a great way then for you to provide directly to the student athletes, again, if that's something that you're inclined to do so. Really
exciting to see all this stuff, but can I say one thing that Ray Redding had said about the softball game and the baseball game? If you can get out there, even if it's just for an inning, get out there and, as he put it, make it hurt, bring your friends, go out there because he wants to donate as much as possible. So let's help him fulfill that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Hail Married podcast. I'm Atovs.
And I'm the Tovs.
We'll be back soon with our spring football coverage wrap up.
Hey, birds up.